They say a good character design can be identified by their silhouettes alone, but what if the character is their silhouette? The Vector and Shadow Fight series have got to be one of the most iconic figures in mobile gaming, and while I'm sure they need no introduction, for those who do, these two series were the golden children of the Russian developers Neki. Both games were well known for using very realistic animations with silhouetted characters to create a unique type of gaming genre at the time, with the Vector series in particular having two games, the beloved Vector 1 and the not so appreciated Vector 2. Both focus primarily on parkour, using real-life inspiration to create the very accurate movements it's known for. But despite Vector 2 not being quite as popular as its predecessor, it actually holds a secret. During my last video where I explained how the game failed as a sequel, I stumbled upon a very unusual question within the Vector community. Where is the secret room on floor 35? Now at first I thought this was just some random gameplay thing, like a hidden area to get some loot type of scenario, but it turns out that it's actually supposed to be the place for players to continue the story. However, nearly everyone who's played the game never found it, and the game was still playable, but now as an endless runner, and it would stay that way all until it was removed from the App Store. So that begs the question, why? Why would Vector 2 have an unfinished level and story? What caused the developers to just abandon it outright? And more importantly, is it possible that the secret room in floor 35 exists? Well, before we jump into that, I think we should take a step back and analyze the story to get a proper understanding of why floor 35 is so important. Vector takes place in the near distant future of 2168, and it's about a silhouetted man, presumably named Vector, who breaks free from his enslavement at some unnamed corporation and tries to escape, using his inhuman stamina and parkour skills to get him across most of the city, through bustling skyscrapers, precarious construction zones, and finally through a technologically advanced park. Vector was so close to freedom, but he was eventually captured and put into cryostasis to be studied. Then, 20 years later, deep inside an underground facility, Vector is reawakened to run some tests, and it's also where the story of Vector 2 begins. Under the guidance of the facility's curator, Simon, the person responsible for all the tests, Vector has to go through several floors, parkouring against futuristic obstacles and moving platforms. Should he fail or die, he will simply come back as a clone to try again. However, during the testing phase, Vector is contacted by a mysterious hacker from the outside, who offers him a way out. And thanks to the hacker's help, Vector is able to escape the watchful eyes of the curator and into the maintenance area. The game then shifts perspective by letting us play as the next batch of clones trying to find and capture the renegade. Together with the help of an AI named Sam, we manage to track down the last whereabouts of the rogue Vector near the facility's cooling cabinets, which I'm assuming is the equivalent of a PC's cooling system. Rogue Vector is able to sabotage the machines, so Simon sends you down there to try and fix it. However, once that's done, Clone Vector was contaminated due to the radiation those machines emitted, which could endanger the DNA structure of his future clones. So that's when you're finally given the task of looking for a DNA fixer in, you guessed it, a room somewhere on floor 35. Many players have tried to look for the room, checked every nook and cranny, yet the room is nowhere to be found. And based on many question forums and other posts, it boiled down to Neki abandoning Vector 2 midway through. That's why no new story prompt would appear no matter how far you traveled. And from what I've seen, someone managed to make it as far as floor 1000. However, I can't really verify for certain, as with most of these videos, usually the ones boasting floors with 2 zeros, they always seem to follow the same trend of completing the stage but never actually showing the menu screen after. The only recorded one I've seen that is probably legit is floor 61, as at the end it's just impossible with there being no more platforms to run on and just falling straight into an abyss. It kinda reminds me of a similar thing that happens in the original Pac-Man, where there's a graphical limit to how far the game can go. And since Vector 2 was no longer serviced by Neki, and it's relatively easy to hack and mod APKs, you could probably just change some text to make it look like a certain floor. So with all that in mind, the best place to look for any clues is everyone's favorite, Reddit. Although the results were about what you'd expect: no room, game unfinished, Vector 1 better. Next, I tried to look at other gaming related sites, and they all had about the same results. I also tried to look at their webpage, their Facebook page, and I even tried to look for clues in their newest game, Spine, since it supposedly takes place in the same universe. But the game wasn't even out yet, so I couldn't find anything worth noting. At that point, I felt like I was basically wasting my time searching for something that had an obvious answer, and as I was about to call it off and work on another video, I received this comment from a subscriber that changed everything. You see, the truth is, Vector 2 shouldn't even exist. Let me explain. It all starts with Facebook. I know that sounds weird, but hear me out. Both Vector and even Shadow Fight were made exclusively for social media gaming. If you do or don't remember, during the era of Facebook, they introduced something called Facebook Games. Farmville, Dragon City, Candy Crush, you name it. Before they were beloved mobile games, they were originally from Facebook. So what does this have to do with Vector? Well, Neki is a Russian developer, and all the way in Mother Russia, they had their own Facebook called VK. At the time, VK were fond of pay-to-win games, so a newly formed Neki decided to try their hand in the social media gaming market, and thus led to the creation of the first and original Shadow Fight 1 and the beta version of Vector. Despite both initially being side projects, the developers were actually quite ambitious and had many things planned. Like, did you ever notice how in Vector 1, the 3 stages felt off, like it was missing something? Well, that's actually the case, as inside the game's files, there were 6 additional stages planned. Technology Park was never the end for Vector, as there was even a poll for what setting players would want for stage 4, the choices being either a high-speed subway or a chemical plant. Unfortunately, the results and the poll itself are things I don't have access to, as again, VK is a Russian Facebook, I don't even like using normal Facebook, and I'm not Russian, so I wouldn't know if the poll's still up or if it was removed. And it doesn't help that trying to search it up on Google is impossible because remember, Vector is also the word for basic graphics. It's the same equivalent of trying to look up the game Granny only to get this. Now add a language barrier and you'll see what I mean. But the reason I believe this is true is because prior to this, I discovered that Vector had a lot of deleted content. Thanks to the dedicated Vector community, they were able to recover these lost levels and assets to the game's files. As you can see, there are many cut stages, but the one that stands out to me the most was the facility. Because do you notice something different? That's right, it uses Vector 1's jump trick box and a similar interface, meaning that was originally a stage for Vector 1. Not only that, but Vector 2 was never its original name. It was actually supposed to be called Vector Labs, and the reason for it was that the game was supposed to be a small spin-off, not a full-blown sequel. The developers were planning to experiment with the core gameplay of Vector by introducing armor and procedurally generated levels. However, during its development, social media gaming was dead at that point. People didn't use social media for games, and Facebook would slowly lose relevancy as the most dominant would be Insta, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. Plus, places like Steam started to become mainstream, so the majority of game publishers would either sell their games there or use the App Store or Play Store, as those were much easier to access and had a larger audience. So, the CEO of Neki decided that after all the work that was put into Vector Labs, it was better to just rebrand the whole thing as a sequel, and thus, Vector 2 was born. That explains why it felt so different to many players. Instead of the usual linear story levels, it became a roguelike, which a good chunk of players disliked, which is also what led to its poor sales, and eventually it shut down. So, in the end, the secret room in floor 35 was probably never there. It could still be somewhere in the game's files, but since Neki had long abandoned the game, I doubt it had anything to offer. But I don't want to leave this video on a sad note. There's a reason I still made this video despite it being a wild goose chase. It was for the fanbase, as it's still alive and kicking. Vector had been released for a long time now, but there's still people interested in the game and still talk about it to this day. That's why just this year, Neki released the remastered version of Vector 1, and while it's not the best, it shows how much players love Vector and want to see the continuation, or at least the end of his story. It's possible this Vector remaster will continue off where Vector 2 ended. Maybe Neki will also remaster Vector 2. The future is uncertain, but what we do know is that while the story of Vector ended at floor 35, its legacy will still continue. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I didn't expect to make another Vector video after the last one, but it is what it is. I was hoping to find more about Floor 35, but unfortunately the answer was quite obvious. So you could consider this video basically a part 2 of why Vector 2 failed. But regardless, special thanks again to Tim for giving me a crucial piece to the puzzle of Vector 2's downfall. Also big thanks to Vectored, Sametaor, and DRAKX for the footage. These two were able to showcase the hidden stuff inside the game's files, while Sam made my life a whole lot easier by posting gameplay in HD and in an organized fashion, so I didn't have to sit through 4 hours of gameplay looking for the right footage. Next video will either be about a game recommended from a subscriber, or I could go triple or nothing and do a video on Cannibal. For those who don't know, Cannibal was basically the original Vector, the one that inspired it in the first place, and based on the visuals alone, you can already see that there's similarities. If there's any other games you'd like me to cover, please comment them down below. I already have a long list of video topics from you guys, so the more the merrier. If you liked the video, please remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already. All of these help my video get noticed in the algorithm. So until next time, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.